Welcome to another episode of the Semi-Related Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Eishin. Today I'm joined with Dave Renfrew, partner at Recruit-Hire-Retain. Dave, how you doing?
Great, Jacob. Good to see you, man.
I'm glad to have you on the podcast, and I'm really excited to learn a little bit more about this new venture and then kind of learn about how you're going to tie all this experience you have and all this great industry knowledge you have. So if you want to get started and just kind of tell us a little bit about Recruit-Hire-Retain.
Yeah, great opportunity came with some great industry leaders, myself and three others that we just came available. Excuse me. And we all kind of started talking and we said, well, why don't we just start our own gig? And this is recruit-hire-retain.com. And so who we've got joining with us, we have Mike Coble. Mike's been in the industry 30 plus years. We've also got Sadie Church, well known within the industry as well. She's got 20 plus years. And then also Ellen Voy, who is the founder of Women in Trucking, who recently retired from there. And she joined us on there as well. So we have a pretty dynamic duo of some folks of great industry knowledge that are what we're just wanting to do is get out and help carriers to become more efficient, more effective in their recruiting, their compliances, all these different issues that they're currently having, because it's tough out there recruiting drivers, really is.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, this really is an all-star lineup. So I want to kind of take a step back and talk about how Dave got to be involved with all these leaders and dive into your resume, the experience you bring to the table, and just kind of what what all you've learned from this career. So if you want to start at the beginning, how you got into, trucking, transportation, logistics, and then we'll go from there.
Oh my, we're going back. We're going to be doing some leapfrogging way back.
Don't say years. You don't want to date yourself.
Yeah, we don't want to do that, but it's all good. It's well earned years and a lot of great experience and good things that have happened. Back a long time ago, I started delivering chips for a company, driving a truck at Pepsi. I was driving a tractor trailer for them as well. Got into another company that I was doing dispatching and everything with as well. And then a friend of mine at that time said he's got a lot of trucking experience, and he was starting a new company. He asked me to join him, so we did. We did that for about 6 years. We had our own trucking company, hauling auto parts from Michigan down to Kansas City, where I used to live, but also hauling liquor back from Kansas City back up to the Michigan area. I had that going. We had about 16 trucks. Man, that is some work. It's
Yeah.
24/7, all the problems, call in the middle of the nights and everything, but it was a lot of fun. And then, my partner kind of went sideways a little bit, so ended up selling the company. And what I pulled out of this is what I like to help people find good careers and good opportunities. So I kind of went into the recruiting side, and I worked for JB Hunt for a short period of time recruiting, and then went to Swift, and then had a great opportunity to be moved over to FedEx, start contract relations. They never really had a recruiting department. And I was part of a great team that we hired independent contractors over at FedEx right there. And then they felt that it was all kind of stabilized a little bit. And then went on to a couple other companies and ended up over at Yellow. Unfortunately, Yellow's demise, but that was a great experience over at Yellow, a huge corporation. It was dealing with Teamsters. I was in charge of starting a whole recruiting department. Again, Yellow never had a full-blown recruiting department. So I was in charge of getting that all started up with new recruiters, getting processors in place, everything in line. We were hiring drivers, dock workers, mechanics, supervisors. We were running about 5,000 to 7,000 people we were hiring a year through there. And that was pretty large. And, unfortunately that I kind of saw where things were going with Yellow and just didn't think it was quite we wanted to be there for the end of that. So I ended up moving on to another company. And, I've got a lot of experience in, going in and fixing problems with companies, whether it's cost per hire, is their funnel, their hiring funnel where they have clogs and things like that in there, and was able to reduce the cost per hires for a lot of companies and expedite the time to hire. That's a big thing with the drivers. You need to hire them as quickly and efficient as possible, but hiring the safest drivers that we possibly can. So there, and then you and I met at Roadrunner when I came over there. Again, that was another place that had some major issues that we went in and fixed, and you got to see a lot of the things that we did there. To improve the recruiting department. Took over orientation there as well, and the retention problem that they were having, took that department over as well. And you got to experience some of the fun things that we did because you were helping out in the marketing department. So you saw a lot of the great attributes that everybody does when everybody comes together to be able to resolve issues. And that's a big part that I'm pretty proud of, is to be able to work interdepartmental, working with safety, maintenance, payroll, operations, all of those different departments, because they all linked each other together to be able to become much more efficient. And you were helping out on the branding as well, and you saw some remarkable branding changes that went on there, which just became great opportunities. Left there, went over to the tech side, went to work for 10th Street, and was doing industry relations. Basically, it's kind of sales out, attending conferences and, retention as well, talking with our current clients, making sure everything's good there. Then they had, we just had things that they wanted to change direction. So left myself open. Mike Coble was there as well. And Mike and I were talking, and then got with Sadie Church, hire retain consulting group. And she asked us if we would be partners with her, as well as Ellen Boy. So here we are. I've got over 30 years of experience and knowledge, and it's been a wonderful venture so far. And I'm looking forward to this new venture that we're going to do, is go out and help other carriers become more efficient in the hiring spectrum. So there's quite a bit there.
Yeah, there's a lot to digest, but I think throughout this conversation, we can kind of dig into it piece by piece. So, something I want to start with was two pieces of your resume there. So, you talked about building a trucking company with your partner up to 16 trucks. And then you also kind of casually mentioned at one point you were hiring about 5 to 7,000 drivers a year. So, between those two, that's a huge change in kind of the scope of work there. So, I want to hear some of the lessons you learned between these two types of operations, these really small fleets where you have a great connection with every single driver. You may know them all, you may know their preferences, you may know, the details of the business on another level compared to working at one of these mega fleets, and how you can kind of maintain culture within the economies of scale.
Yeah, that's really important piece right there, Jacob, is, understanding the drivers. Drivers might want to be recognized and, not just be a number. They want to be heard. They want to be able to put their influence. They're the front line of a company, and they're out there, seeing the shippers front end, and, all the issues that come along with driving out there, as there are many challenges. So a smaller company, it's a lot easier to do that with. And when we were growing our own company, it was just kind of a truck or two at a time. But you also, you got to understand the market and what's going on, not just today, but what's going on for the next 12 months. Predictions, analysts on what can we grow? Are we safe to grow? So those are really some of the key things you've got to look in. Now, when you go to a larger corporation, there's a lot more other pieces that are all to this. So, when we were doing hiring for all these different drivers for all the different locations at Yellow, it was like 360 locations throughout the country that we were hiring for. And understanding the driver and what their needs are, listening to them. And this is what I built my recruiting department on, is, the old saying, God gave you 2 ears, 1 mouth. Listen to them. And then if they're not telling you everything, try to draw the things out of the drivers to understand what their needs are, what their expectations are. Not every driver is a good fit for every company. So it's trying to put that all together to make sure you're bringing in, you're not just bringing in turnover. And that's what you've got to be able to understand and realize is, you can increase your turnover by bad hiring practices. And if you can make your hiring practices a lot more clear. But with that said, when you're dealing with the mid and larger size companies, you've got all these different departments that I mentioned earlier that you've got to work with. So a lot of times they have their own way of going about wanting to do things. And you need to be able to bring this all together for one purpose, is to hire good, safe drivers. For operations, understanding what their needs are, where they're needing drivers. Safety, okay, what do we need to look at doing? What do we need to do about hiring the safe drivers? What are we looking at? What do we want to measure on there? What's their history going to tell us about getting the right drivers? Then you've got your maintenance department. Do we have all the trucks in line and ready to go for the new drivers that come in so they're not experiencing problems? Payroll, are they all set up properly for payroll so they're getting paid on time and no discrepancies there? So it's a big taking, but you just got to work at breaking each of one of these silos down sometimes that I've had to do in my past. And a lot of it comes down to trust, building relationships with the different departments and letting them and collaborating together to be able to get that one goal. Because a company's not going to grow if you can't keep your trucks filled, or adding additional headcount on there as well. So it's a big undertaking, but that's what's fun about it. I mean, I've been doing this 30 years, and trucking's been great for me and my family, for my life, and brought 6 kids up through it. So things are good.
Yeah, and I want to come back to that breaking down the silos piece. So let's put a pin in that, and I will come back to that one later. But you mentioned something in there about always looking at the market and understanding the economy and when it's a good time to grow. So could you kind of talk about some of your experience? You've seen these different freight cycles, hiring whenever the market's hot, hiring whenever it's cold, and what companies are doing for retention during these different cycles as well.
Yeah, so it's difficult, but we have a lot of analysis out there, professionals that can kind of help predict. And this last year and a half has been a challenging time. And right now, I say a lot of the companies are kind of being cautious, very much, on what's going on. I've just read there's a slight uptick in the van division right there, so that's a good sign. But it wasn't much. Anytime you can get up a little bit is good, but trucking is like a roller coaster. Back in 08, 09, 10, it was a difficult time back then, much more than I think than it is today. Unfortunately, a lot of companies lost right then. But understanding what the market is, and I'm not the professional in that piece of it. I rely that onto the analysis of be able to forecast where we're going. But companies right now are being very cautious. There is a lot of M&As going on, mergers and acquisitions, and I see that being very strong this year. So that will be some of the growth that they can take on, not being risky and on other ends of it. But, when you want to make sure you have the right blend of drivers, and, not to have too many drivers and not enough freight, because that just makes a lot of people unhappy right there. So working closely with, your operational people, understanding what their needs are again, is huge on that. So just again, I think 24 is going to be a year of caution to whether there's going to be growth or not, organically, or through M&As, or how it's going to be.
And then how do you see recruitment strategies changing, with these different cycles? Do you change up how you're approaching drivers? Do you just work internally with kind of what are the needs? How do you go about kind of understanding from a recruitment side of things the business needs, as well as how the market is kind of shaping what drivers are looking for?
Yeah. So over the last year and a half, I mean, things have been kind of, I guess, stagnant a little bit on there. So what some companies have done, they've got more drivers than what they've got freight for. So they've actually had to cut back on drivers. And during that time, that's when you really go look into safety, with the drivers, and operations for productivity, safe drivers. And unfortunately, the ones that were not very productive, not wanting to go meet the company's needs, staying out 2 weeks, or delivering on time and picking up on time and everything else, you look at that, your safety, are they safe drivers? And there was some cutbacks that they did on that as well. So that plays some factors. Then it goes back into safety starts to tighten up their qualifications of what kind of drivers they want to bring on. And there's been a huge focus on quality instead of quantity going on with that perspective. And with that said, over the years, I've really noticed a lot more time being spent, the recruiters spending time on the phone with a potential new driver that to come on that they're recruiting, to make sure they actually are a good fit. Are they, safety wise, operational wise, personal wise, location wise, and if they're not the good fit, then they'll probably pass on them a lot faster than they would have in the past when they had open trucks that they needed to get filled. Right now, there's a lot of companies that have got their trucks filled, and basically they're just hiring to replace the ones that are leaving right there. And one thing I always remember, a good driver doesn't leave a good company. So what you're looking at, your pool of your drivers, they've always been talk of shortage of drivers. And I always questioned that. I don't think it's necessarily a shortage of drivers. I think it's more of a shortage of quality drivers on that. Then you've got a lot of changes going on in the demographics of drivers. I mean, what year and a half ago, the average age was 57. Now it's about 47. So with that whole different generation is coming in of drivers, and the drivers that we knew in the past are not the same kind of drivers we know now. So you've got to adapt to the generational gaps and changes that you have with your drivers. So that's something you got to really kind of take a deep look into. And a lot of companies have made changes on how they operationally change and do things. Have gone to more regional or slip seating and, back and forth like that so the drivers can get home more, because that's something that's priority to a lot of drivers. What their needs are is to be home more often. The OTR, there's still massive needs for that. And it can be a little bit more challenging on the OTR companies for them to recruit for drivers to want to stay out 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, and let's kind of dive into that a little bit because you made a really great point of how there's not just one truck driver, right? There's all of these different roles. You can be a city local driver and, like you said, be home every night, but there's also the over the road piece that, can put you on these longer trips. So, can we kind of dive into how those different types of positions play into recruitment and retention and some of the trends you've seen over your career in those?
Yeah. So again, that's where I've always trained my recruiters to be able to dive into each of the individuals to see what their needs are. And depending on what the company is, every company is different, what they hire, what they need, where they need them on that. So, hiring local drivers, that is a lot more easier. Does it pay as much as maybe a regional or a OTR? No, typically it doesn't, but they've gotten better on the pay right there. And that's a whole nother discussion is pay, where it's gone. But, again, is where you got to really dive into is understanding the driver. Again, what their needs are. What do they want? Not just what the company wants and what they need. So that is, again, those conversations are a lot more deeper. And if you're not doing those conversations with your recruiter and that potential driver, that's something you need to really take a good hard look at, because that will dictate. Now, doing hiring for local and then hiring for regional and OTR, yeah, that gets a lot more strenuous and a lot more detailed on the availability of those drivers. Because when COVID hit, that just changed the whole market. When drivers were wanting, they were leaving. I mean, we had a massive exit of drivers leave to go do Amazon or Uber and Lyft and things like that, because they wanted to be home near the family and they needed to for medical reasons, personal reasons, and everything else like that. So it's been a little bit of a different recruiting strategies, I guess you could say, on how you go and how you market your brand, how you're going out there to present the brand to them, because drivers are looking a lot more closer at your brand than ever before with technology and internet and everything else just flourishing. That they go in, probably I'd say 75% of drivers go look at your company and go look at your safety scores. They look at your brand. How engaged are you with your drivers? Those are the things that you need, because that goes back to the retention. When recruiting starts, that's when retention starts. And everybody's involved in the retention process through there. So they're kind of flourishing through these things. And the more you can be um, transparent with the driver and very open with the driver, whether it's with operations, with safety, payroll, maintenance, all of those have got to play a very transparent role with their drivers and communicate with their drivers. And that's where it helps out a lot in the retention. You still see a lot of companies that have got some very, very high turnover rates that are out there, and they bake them in for their turnover. And unfortunately, a lot of the larger companies is challenging because each driver manager has so many drivers that they're trying to work with that it becomes difficult. And part of building a retention program is to work with a team, not inside operations, outside, to communicate with the driver, especially within the 90 days. But I'd say you continue on. You always want to communicate with them. And you want this offset department because they'll be a little bit more upfront and honest. They're not going to tell their boss what their problems are. I got a problem with you. Dun, dun, dun. They're more open to understanding. But what you do with that information is the key success. If you're just taking it in and just here, there, this is a problem. Okay, we'll work on it. But if you're actually doing your due diligence and passing it on, let leadership know what's going on, and so they can work with the different things to make the changes. Drivers come up with some great ideas. Again, they're the forefront of out there. They're dealing with the shippers. They're going on the roads and where the problems are, and listen to the drivers. Are they all right? No, but a lot of them have great information. And if you get them involved and then show them back, hey, we're trying to make these changes, and showing that to the drivers, you'll continue to grow their trust and everything there. And that speaks huge volumes for them to be able to do that. And things start to get better. Be able to reduce retention and previously. And that's part of it, is just be transparent with the drivers, treat them like a human being. They put their pants on and everything else, just like everybody else. They're human beings. And a lot of companies got away from that for a long time, but I see a lot of companies doing a great job, going out there, engaging with their drivers, trying to make things better, whether it's, working with the shippers to be able to let them utilize their restrooms. That was kind of a weird thing. Why wouldn't you let somebody use your restroom? Well, unfortunately, and then parking is another big issue right now. So there's always a lot of things going on inside the transportation industry and trucking that makes it really hard for drivers. It's a hard job on these drivers. So hopefully that hit on
Yeah,
a lot of things for you there.
no, that was great. I kind of want to dive into a trend that you mentioned there that, historically, a lot of companies just kind of baked in this driver turnover, right? They've expected a certain amount of churn and planned for that. But like you mentioned, companies are finding some ways to be a little bit more innovative and lower that number and look at different ways to operate their business model. So I want to give an example of American Central Transport. I had Phil Wilt on the podcast a few episodes ago as well, and he talked about some of the programs they have. So they've implemented a chaplain. They have anonymous driver surveys, which they have two-way communication on, so they can dig into issues they find with drivers and act on those, like you mentioned. So I'm curious if this is something you're kind of seeing as a broader change in the industry, or is this something you're advocating for, these multiple systems so drivers can have their proper feedback, make sure the company receives it, feel comfortable to give that, and then also have these different resources to help with retention?
Yeah, no, you hit it on the spot, and I think it's a twofold. Yes, still advocate to be able to do better retention tools, but I see a lot of companies doing some really great things out there. Again, it's communicating, being transparent with the drivers, taking their information. The chaplain, that's a great thing right there. Making better facilities at their terminals, so they can shower, they can do their dishes, but also their laundry, and maybe a lounge, having a lounge for a driver, something for them to be able to go sit down, relax, get out of the truck, out of their everyday thing right there, living in that truck. So yeah, I see a lot of companies doing some really fantastic things that we mentioned, but also, again, back to the communication with drivers, getting their feedback. I created a long time ago as a DEFCON. Basically, it's an alarm system for when a driver is potentially at risk. And, it was DEFCON 5 down to 1, 5 being okay, 1 being, hey, this is bad. And, whether it was in payroll, whether it was maintenance, operations with their dispatchers, it could be multiple things like that. But it would get escalated based on if it was 5, everything's good. 4, hey, let's keep an eye. 3, hey, there's things going south. Making sure you get to leadership, because they're the ones that are going to have to help drive the changes that we need to do within that company to make it, a little bit better for that driver. So, and it's typically when you hear from a 1, 2, 3 drivers, it's probably a lot more drivers than that. Historically,
Mhm.
yeah. If you hear one thing's off and on, okay, that's just a driver upset about something, had a bad experience one day. But when you start hearing multiple things of the same problems, that's when you better start addressing them right there. And that's going to make your big changes. And there's companies that have made huge, huge leaps and bounds on reducing their retention. And again, a lot of it's helped over this last year and a half, 2 years of, from the pandemic that we came out of, on how to handle drivers and how to handle their problems, and being transparent with them about the changes. Again, I say this multiple times. If you've got issues, let the drivers know you're hearing them and what you're doing to try to fix them. And again, that will engage them. And the retention starts again back at recruiting. If you're hiring their good drivers, don't hire your turnover. And that's easy to do when you've got empty seats and you need to fill trucks. It's really easy to do that. And when you hire more, you'll see your turnover rate typically go up a little bit. But again, if you're really diving into learning what the drivers' needs are and what your expectations, whether it's from safety, from operations, things will get better. Because I know for
Yeah.
me, if I know what I've got to do, I can go do it. But if I don't know my expectations, then it makes it a little bit more challenging.
Yeah, and then I think I'm ready to come back to that breaking down those silos, right? So you mentioned something earlier that, you lean on people for different things, right? We were talking about the market. You said you'd kind of let the analysts give you that information. And I think that's one of your strengths. And one of the things we kind of discussed here is that you take this holistic approach working with all these different groups. You realize it's not, just the recruiters or the orientation and then it ends there. It's also this retention piece that works with every department. So kind of walk us through what some of the steps are that you took to bring all these groups together, provide drivers with the best experience you could, and some of the results you've seen from that.
Yeah. So I mean, the biggest one, I think, recruiting and safety are the two departments that kind of intermingle a lot. And making sure that you're both on the same page and what your expectations and what you need, and going in, working with the leader in the safety department, and understand, okay, what do we want to do on the safety side? What are your expectations? Because you need to be totally in line with safety. Recruiting does, and I think it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. But the leader of each of those departments, they've got to have a good working relationship and be able to understand the issues that they've had and what are we trying to prevent. And then you kind of build out a guideline, which would be your qualifications. So building out a shared qualification that you guys all agree upon, where you can still recruit and hire people, but also get the safest ones. And again, that goes back to hiring the safest drivers as possible you can out there, not just putting a butt in the seat. So I think it's a little bit of a time, and just it's building a relationship with the leaders of each of those departments and understanding what your goals and what your needs are. And it takes time, but it paid trifold. We all got on the same page. We knew what our expectations of what our hiring needs are and what kind of drivers we need to hire, where we need to hire them. That came from operations. So you can go hire a ton out of the Texas area and everything else, but our operations is running over in Pennsylvania, or in it could be Utah or something like that, where maybe it's a little bit more challenging to hire drivers. But if you understand what the needs are and putting that down, and everybody will fall in line, all the different departments will, and it really paid trifold again on being successful on that, is building relationships with department heads and breaking those barriers down. Because sometimes, the safety says, oh man, we're not hiring the right people, and they kind of get real stringent, and everybody has to communicate about different changes that they need to implement, and that they all come together and agree upon the changes that need to happen for whatever reason it may be. Again, like last year and a half, so we've tightened up qualifications for a lot of companies. Before, they were taking 3 months. Now they've gone to 1 year or 2 years in the last 3 years for the type of drivers. They're having less violations, less accidents, less roadside inspection violations right there. So again, it's just communication within the department heads and sharing that goals to what we need to do together to bring that down. And that will reduce your retention as well.
Yeah, and something of interest there as well is I see a common thread of you bringing data to these conversations, right? You brought these examples of getting this driver feedback and being able to say, hey, we heard this from this many drivers, but we can assume this is going to be, a broader suite because we only got this many responses. For example, I don't know an exact, example, but you also have that DEFCON system. You can kind of say, hey, we're seeing a lot more drivers trend this way. So bringing your own data and then also asking other groups, like you mentioned, reaching out to operations saying, hey, where do we need the most staff? And let's put all this data together to make the best decision. So kind of walk us through that process and where you found some success by taking this data driven approach to recruiting and retention.
No, that's a great point. Thanks for bringing that up. So obviously, you can look at your, where all of your applications and leads are coming in from. You can then look at the process as they go through the funnel of the hiring. Where they're getting knocked off, what are they getting disqualified for, is what you really want to look at as well. So, for instance, a good driver may go to a company that is not that safe and not most caring about their equipment. So they may go get tons of roadside inspections and get put out of service. Well, that goes onto a driver's record as well as a company's record. And you really got to dive in. So if a driver he sees a couple of those and he's getting them on there with the same company, and then he left on there as well for that company because wasn't safe company and he was getting violated just as much as the company was, and he didn't want that record to go with him. Excuse me. And then, so you need to look at those things when you're doing hires. And, you look at the number of jobs that somebody may have, number of violations. Well, you take this data that you've gathered, so you take a month data that you go, okay, safety, this is what our issues are. What can we do to maybe be a little bit more lenient? And I don't like the word lenient, but a little bit more tailored to what the needs are out there. And then that goes for the same thing of operations. You're getting all these applications from the drivers wanting to come on for a Pacific area, but you don't have much freight there. Well, why don't we go talk to operations and sales? Say, hey, can we get more business out of there? I can get a lot more drivers to grow our business. So those are another things like that. And then as a driver's coming on, they always come back to the recruiters because that was their first initial person that they met. The recruiters, they're calling the recruiters and saying, man, my equipment is horrible. Getting that information over to the maintenance side, what they can do to better equip their equipment with to be a little bit more friendlier to the driver, I guess you could say on like that. But taking all those data points, and then here to like what you worked in the marketing side, make sure we're marketing ourselves to the right locations, whether it's advertising and everything else, and driving that in the right location, because it's very important that your brand is represented well, but also engaging in the right areas. And engaging is something really that is a long time tool that I look at as well for, advertising, when it's not always about posting, I got jobs available, I got this available, that. Engaging them with, good information about your company, what your company's doing, because drivers will follow this. And when I say they'll follow it, they may not be with your company, but they're following your page and seeing the things that you're doing. And then when they go have a bad experience with their current company, they're going to remember, hey, X-ray company right there is doing a great job. I like what they're doing. Let me look into them. So it's a long-term marketing plan that is not always showing an ROI, but it's an engaging tool and, flourishing your brand out there as well.
Yeah, and then I think we're ready to go into kind of what I will call your bread and butter, because I know you're very humble about your resume, but recently you won an award from Transport Topics. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, or do I need to fill in that for you?
Oh, yeah, I'm not one to really talk too much about. I mean, it's not about me; it's about my team. As a leader, you're there to get the tools, coach and mentor your team to go in the right direction. And I've had some great teams that I've been able to work with, and fortunately, I was nominated for the Recruiting Professional of the Year by Transport Topics in 2021 and won it which was a great honor, but it was an honor for my team. And that's the way I kind of look at those things. It's not me. It's the team that you create and you build, and giving your team, the ability to go out and exercise what they're hired to do. I'm not a micromanager. If I have to micromanage somebody, I probably don't need them, for one. But I want my teams to flourish and to learn and to grow, because my job as well is to you know mature them and maybe possibly take my job, prepare them to move up through the company into other departments. That's my biggest reward, is seeing my team members, to grow like that. And that's where I get a lot of joy out of.
Well, yeah, let's dive into kind of some of the first steps to building one of these. I might call it a recruitment machine, right? Whenever you come to a company, or now with Recruit, Hire, Retain, whenever you work with a client, what is kind of the process? Where do you start at? What are some of the KPIs you like to look at first? And then what are some of the first action steps you might take?
First, I mean, there's a couple of first steps you take out. You want to look at their ad and lead generation. So are they getting their money's worth for what they're currently, their campaigns that they're putting out there? And it's not my job to tell them where to go to a different company. I'm going to give them the data and show them. And I can give them recommendations based on it. Every company is different on different kind of campaigns that you need to work on. But you need to be looking at your cost per lead, your conversion rate over to a full application, your cost per hires are the key essential KPIs on that piece right there as well. And then another piece that you need to dive into is look at the process. That you've got a funnel that you're coming down, and you need to analyze that funnel. And this is something you need to look at, whether it's monthly, quarterly, but continuously looking at, because a clog may not be there today. It may be there 3 weeks later on there. And when I mean clogs, every time that it goes through the process, there's, whether it's a handoff to a different department, the processing department, safety department, or whatever, you need to analyze those days that it takes to get through there. And when you see clogs in your funnel, this is what you need to go look at your process. I've been fortunate enough that I've been able to go in and change a lot of processes to make it a lot more efficient, more quicker to be able to go through for a time to hire. Everybody wants to hire a driver as quickly as possible, and you can. But here's the thing. Did you get your drug test? You get all your reports back. Okay, great. Is that driver given a notice where he's currently at? If he's not, that might be a red flag that you may need to look at as well. So typically it's about a 2 to 3 week process, but you always want to bring it down. And again, the biggest thing is I look at, depending on where the driver's at and why he's wanting to leave. Yeah, he may want to leave pretty much quick, but if he's not giving them a notice and he leaves you, he's probably not going to give you a notice either. And with all respect, I want drivers to give their notice, do it properly, because in this industry, don't burn a bridge. You just never know when you may come back around like that. So always be careful. But yeah, those are the quick things. And then you're looking at your orientation. You want to look at how many days, what are they getting done? A lot of things now when COVID hit, a lot of people went to be able to electronic doing, remote orientations, things like that. Looking at their orientation process, is all this paperwork be done before they get there, so you're not wasting that time doing that? Because orientation should be about understanding safety, operations, maintenance, expectations, all those. And I didn't have orientation under me, but they had orientation going on at multiple different locations, and I went and visited it. I went back to leadership. I said, listen, we need to make some big changes in orientation. They're not getting what they need to. All they were doing is putting up videos and not talking to them. So I got orientation, brought in a centralized location where corporate office was, and I was able to get everybody to come through and meet them. There's a retention tool right there. So it started with the president. He came in and introduced himself right there. You had maintenance, safety, operations, payroll, everybody, insurance, risk, all of them coming through and meet the drivers and talk to them and tell them their expectations and what they need to do to be able to meet the company's expectations as well. So that paid big trifold right there on the retention piece, because now they know people, they've got a face to a name, which is very helpful. That so there's a lot of different other pieces that you look at. You're looking at your marketing, your engagement, when we go in to work with a client on there. So there's, depending on the scope of work that's needed, it depends on how deep of a dive we can do.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple takeaways there that um, you're taking some of those lessons that we talked about in the beginning, right? When going from a 16 truck fleet to, a mega fleet, you can still have those connections. They can still put a face to each of these people and feel attached, if that makes sense. So I think that kind of goes again back to what we were talking about in the beginning, that building that culture. And I want to talk a little bit more about this onboarding experience, right? You'll hear of a lot of companies that just hire a driver, put them in a truck, and send them on their way. So, kind of take us a little bit deeper into why bringing this onboarding experience to drivers. And, like you said, personalizing it, speaking directly to them, answering questions, and making it this multi-day experience that really gives them the tools they need to succeed in a company.
Right. A good orientation basically would be about 2 days, maybe three at the most, is what they would need. So at the beginning of it, there's a lot of ATSs that are out there that you can send all those paper in videos. They've got videos that they can watch online now prior to showing up. You can get all the paperwork pretty much all done prior to showing up. That just probably saved you a day right there. It is getting it done prior to them coming in and having all the documentation. There's a couple things that need to be signed on site, and depending whether it's a company driver's owner, operator, lease purchase, that's a whole nother gamut right there. But when you're able to come in and then really go through the safety piece right there, showing their ELDs, their cameras, all of this stuff, showing how it works, getting into the details of stuff like that, and then operations coming in, talking about routes, the different lanes and everything that they have out there. Again, it pays so much forward to that experience of that driver, as I mentioned. But again, you just really need to look at what you're doing. Is it best for you? Is it best for the driver? And then find that marriage that works for both on that piece.
And then as we start to wrap up here, I have one question I always like to ask our guests to hear kind of their spin on things is what is your bold prediction for the future of trucking?
Oh, it's bright. It's strong. It always will be. Trucking's going to always need to be there. You look in your office right there. You look around. I bet you almost everything in your office right there has been moved by a truck, at one time or another. Whether if it came from overseas, it had to get on a truck to get to that location, to whether it's a retail location or if it's to a delivery to be delivered at home. So there's a very bright future for this company. I've been doing this for a long time, and again, like I said earlier, it's like a roller coaster. You're going to see what goes up is going to come down, what goes down is going to come back up, and it's just understanding the market out there. But it's a tough time right now that we've been going through for the last year and a half. I see we're going to see some upticks. From talking to analysts about what we're doing, I would say March, April will start to tell the story. We also have an election year, and those can be challenging years too. I've seen it good and I've seen it bad on election years. And so, but trucking overall is always going to be a good industry. It's a strong industry. There is, what was it percentage? It was how many people in the United States are actually in the logistics, transportation, and it's astronomical amount of people that are actually into this line of work. So I'm excited about where it's going to go. There's changes. There's going to be regulation changes. You've got this autonomous trucks, and there's always going to be a need if you put somebody in the truck. You're not going to have a truck driving down by itself. At least not in my lifetime, and I don't think probably yours either. You're much younger than me, but things like that will come around. The different types, whether fuel, whether electric. I'm kind of hesitant about electric because our band, the grid can't handle, I don't think, what we've got right now. And then I think it's one truck is equal to like 400 homes, something like that, to charge up. So there's a lot they've got to work on, but regulations in creating safe roads out there for everybody, four-wheelers understanding what the truck drivers go through out there. A truck driver's lifestyle is very difficult. You think about the weather, the traffic that they're going through, and having to live basically out of truck stops a lot of times. the health of a driver is very difficult too. So, and there's been a lot more education about that, trying to help drivers be a lot more healthier, more fit out there, the way they eat and maybe exercise between their breaks and everything like that. So, but I love this industry. I've been in it for, again, over 30 plus years. It's been great for my family. I know a lot of people, and this industry is really cool. It's a large industry, but a very tight network. I've had a lot of people help me through my industry, and that's what part of what I'm trying to do right now is I want to help others that have helped me, and to be able to keep this industry strong and be able to be as efficient as possible. So that's kind of my goal. Is I'm paying it forward, trying to go out and help other carriers and professionals right now.
Yeah, and I think you made a great point there that it's a great industry because of all the great people. If you listen to any of these podcast episodes, they're all filled with people with a similar story that, found themselves in this industry and were so warmly welcomed. Someone helped them, someone, pushed them along the way, and not just one person, but a number of people every step of the way. So there's a lot of that and a lot of great energy of people, like you said, paying it forward, continuing that tradition of taking care of each other. So like you said, I think there's a bright future for the future of trucking. So
Yeah, I do too. So remember, thank a truck driver when you're out there. You see them, remember what they go through. Give them the distance that they need. It's you got 80,000 pounds going down the road when they're loaded. They can't stop on a dime like a four wheel can. Pulling out in front. Just give them some space. Give them the courtesy. And again, thank a driver for everything they do, because they're the ones that keep the food and everything on the shelf for us to be able to go by.
well, thank you for the time, Dave. I really appreciate it. Where can the people find you and learn a little bit more about Recruit, Hire, Retain?
hire-retain.com, right there to look at us. Also in there, you can schedule a free 1 hour consultation with either myself, Mike, Sadie, or Ellen to find out. And what's neat about us, you're not just getting one person, you're getting all of us when you hire us on, because we collaborate with each other to help. Because I may have a question for something on one piece that Sadie or Mike or Ellen might be able to collaborate with and help out. So again, we just want to be able to make the companies most efficient and effective as possible through the recruiting and safety. We also do speaking engagements as well.
Yeah, and I think a sign of an expert is some of the skills you've talked about today is leaning on others. You use depends a lot because you understand it's not here's a black and white answer. There's always so many variables that go into all of these decisions. So I would definitely recommend anyone who's interested take advantage of that 1 hour consultation. And Dave, I appreciate the time and look forward to having you back on again soon and seeing you around on the conference circle. So
Yep,
thank you.
I'll be out there. I've got one coming up here in a couple of weeks. I'll be heading out to the Conversions Recruit and Retention Conference, which is always real good. And I'll be down at the Private Truck Council. Mike's going to be at Matt's and at TCA. So we're getting out and about, and I look forward to it. And again, Jacob, thanks very much for having me on.
Of course. Thank you, Dave. There we go.
All right.
Easy, right?